What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Lexi J Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Lexi Johnson. This is my husband and co-host, Brett Johnson. This week we are talking about ownership. We're talking about responsibility. We're talking about taking accountability, taking responsibility for where you are, the circumstances at hand, and just kind of, dealing with your shit, pretty much, to put it in summary. Very eloquently put.
To summarize. Own your shit.
Yes. This was something that I had talked about in my announcement for our clients that work with us on nutrition. And I just had essentially said, many of you are here. I mean, more than likely, you're here because you're unhappy, or you're here because you want to make a change. And so often I hear in those conversations with them, in my own head, but with friends and family, when you're in a position where you're unhappy, whether we're talking financially, physically, personal, business, like whatever that is, when you're unhappy, our brain does not want to take responsibility for it. It does not want to take ownership for being unhappy. So we want to point blame, and it's kind of natural. Just like we don't want to be the bad guys in the narrative. But what I talk about in those conversations, and I have to remind myself of this often, is that whether or not it is someone else's fault, it really doesn't matter, because blaming someone else is not going to further you. Blaming someone else is not going to get you out of that unhappy position that you're in your health, in your finances, in your relationship. You have to own it. You have to take responsibility over the actions you put in order to get to where you're at, because there's no undoing it. There's no one coming to help you, no one coming to save you. So the sooner you just hold yourself accountable and take responsibility for the actions or inactions that you had in play, then the sooner you can get progressing, the sooner you can move on, because we get stuck in like this feeling of resentment, I think, towards someone else. And what do you think? Do you think it's people waiting for an apology, or someone waiting for that wrong to be righted?
Yeah, in a situation where you place the blame on somebody else, I think that, it's almost like this waiting game for somebody else to accept or to take responsibility for something, even if it wasn't their fault. And then nobody's happy, because the person that you expect to take blame for it, they don't know that you're thinking that, because maybe it was your fault. Maybe they're like, well, why aren't they taking, responsibility for it? And all the while you're expecting the other person to take responsibility for it. So, regardless of who's actually at fault, a lot of times it's just best if each individual, if they say, hey, I could have done better here, and then the other person will likely say, well, I also could have done better in this particular scenario. It promotes, it fosters that sort of conversation to take place. All it takes is one person to actually admit that they did something wrong, and admit it, be forthright about it, and then others will follow suit as well, and it'll just create a more cohesive environment.
Yeah, so you're talking like more in terms of like a relationship, or like a business, or just some sort of interaction. I'm always I'm thinking of it very individualized, where if I'm placing blame on someone else, it's like more so out of resentment of comparison.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think in my example, it was more of either like a workplace environment or like a relationship.
Yeah, which in like sometimes, say you didn't start a business because you were in a relationship and you prioritize their needs over yours, or their dreams over yours. That's a really tough one. And you really you have to bridge that gap. You have to, take ownership over those decisions you made, but also you're in the position you're in, and there's no going back from what had happened. Like, the worst thing that we could do is just dwell on the past and continue to, ruminate on those thoughts and those regrets and those, inactions. Where are you right now, and what can you do with the hand you've been dealt in this scenario? Because everyone has that long list of, I got dealt the short hand or the short stick here, and I was wronged here, and so had an advantage here. Like, it really doesn't freaking matter, even if it's someone else's fault. You can blame them all you want, but they're not coming to help you. You are the only person. You are in the driver's seat of your life. And when you're constantly pointing the blame to someone else, it's a really helpless feeling, because you're putting your livelihood, you're putting your happiness, you're putting your future into someone else's hands. You're just taking your hands off the wheel completely and saying, you know what? They had they had all responsibility in getting me here. So, whatever comes. And that is such a passive way to live your life. And I don't like that.
It's uncomfortable, to come to terms with the fact that you are the reason for, your own demise.
It's for sure uncomfortable, but it's also, demise is very dooming, I think.
That is a little heavy.
That's a heavy word, but I think it's empowering. If you're just willing to own your shit and you're saying, if I had just as much to play in the problems at hand, then I have just as much. If I was part of the problem, I can be part of the solution. And if you put it that way, then it's empowering, because then you've got your hands on the driver's wheel. Then you can take charge. But if you're constantly saying, I'm in this position because my ex screwed me over, or because my best friend got every opportunity, your ex and your best friend, like, they're not going to come and hoist you up because you were wronged at some point in the past. Like, we have to let go of that. We have to start where we're at and just move forward.
Right. Are you going to hold on to that thing that happened in your past forever and just let it be this ball and chain that holds you back forever? Or are you going to let go? Are you going to let yourself move on and propel yourself into what you want to be in the future? It's a super vulnerable thing to, like, truly admit where you have shortcomings. And it's human nature to want to place the blame on something else. And I think it's also a very prominent cultural norm that we have in this phase of America. Like, it's social media and just the instantaneous nature of everything these days. Like, when something goes wrong, first thing that somebody wants to do half the time is post something on social media about how they were wronged about something. Or they want to text their best friend about, well, can you believe that this just happened? And it's always, well, this happened to me. And you never actually take a step back and think, well, did I have a part? Did I play a part in this thing actually happening? It's easier just to place the blame on somebody else or something else.
Yeah, in the immediate reaction of the situation. But that's not going to further you at all. And just, letting that be your knee-jerk reaction to point the blame, it's such an immature and childlike response. Like, the sign of an evolved, mature adult, in my mind, is someone that can take ownership for their shortcomings, can identify when they screwed up, and then say, but here's what I'm going to do moving forward. But here's what you can expect from me now. And sometimes it's not that conversation between you and someone else, or it's not that conversation between you and your team. It's that conversation in the mirror saying, you know what? I have not been on my game. I've failed you, and you're looking in the mirror. I have been unreliable to you because I haven't consistently worked out, because I haven't consistently hit nutrition, because I haven't, prioritized my mental health and my sleep and all those things. I have failed you, but here's what we're going to do moving forward. Here's what you can expect from me moving forward. That is the most mature, evolved, respectful embodiment of an adult for me.
Definitely is. It's impressive.
That's hot.
Was it last episode or 2 episodes ago we were talking about holding high standards? This plays into holding high standards, with being able to hold a high standard for yourself and self-assess and see, are you doing the right things to get you where you want to go? So we have all these segments of our life, so to speak. I'm maybe this is just the way that my brain works, because I'm fairly, like, I compartmentalize things in my mind. So we have business, we have personal relationships in our personal lives, we have spiritual lives, we have our finances, our personal finances. We have all these different things that basically comprise how we, who we interact with on a daily basis and what we strive to do. And each of us, we weigh these things more heavily depending upon our priorities. And usually what you're going to do is you're going to, whatever topics you weigh the heaviest, like those are the ones that your mind are going to go to immediately and you're going to be more critical of. So if your business life, whatever your work is, if things aren't going the way that they're supposed to go and work is super important to you, then what I would recommend is you make a list, and you make a list of all these things that you could, that essentially, let's make a list of things that make up your workplace effectiveness. Are you timely? Are you a good communicator? Are you all these things? And you grade yourself on them. And if you're able to truly assess how you do these things in an honest way, then you're probably going to be able to truly assess and give yourself some honest feedback. And the whole topic of this podcast, you're going to be able to what?
I'm still listening. Were you waiting for me to hop? Was I supposed to fill in the gap?
Yeah, you were going to fill in right there.
Self-assess. Take ownership.
Right. So if you're going to take ownership of what you do, it's easier to actually take something that's practical, take something that you can measure. You can put on a piece of paper and say, okay, well, here's these categories of these things that comprise how well I perform in these areas of my life. And it gives you this. It's kind of like going back to grade school. You're going to get
your report card.
You're going to get your own little report card and see, okay, well, am I performing to the best of my abilities? And really, it becomes a very black and white situation at that point in time. It's no longer, well, who can I point the blame at? What am I doing? Am I doing it well or am I not doing it well?
Yeah. So last week, for instance, man, it wasn't a great mental health week for me, but I know when I'm thinking in terms of my overall health, sometimes if I just let one slip, I am a serial black and white thinker. Like I have a history of doing this. So in terms of my health, like if my workouts were down the drain, my nutrition was out the window too. And it was just like, when I'm bad, I'm horrid. So last week, for instance, my mental health wasn't super great, which kind of affected my workouts. I talk through the workouts. Like I talk full length in these recordings. So for 30 minutes, I'm in front of my camera solo, just talking to myself. And I pride myself on being an encourager and a motivator and just a communicator. But at the end of the day, I'm really talking to myself, and it can be really hard when those mental health days just kind of get me. So the workouts just weren't to the standard that I would like. However, when I was kind of self-assessing, and I told Brett and I told my Lexi J Wellness girls, like I was so proud of myself because the workouts I was coming in around a C-, honestly. Like it wasn't there. But my steps and my nutrition, I was coming in at an A. And if you're grading yourself that way and you're just being honest about it, like I had a shortcoming right there, but because I continued to deliver on those other two non-negotiables, we're all in check today, all in check this week. We're back into the swing of things. And I think that just being real with yourself and understanding like, okay, shit happens, but you can still take ownership for that and not let it derail you forever, not let it completely, compromise your progress overall. And I think that just victimhood is so common, and it's something that's kind of craveable because it gives you that immediate gratification because people feel sorry for you and they love you and they give you reprieve and they lower the expectations because they want you to feel better. But that only lasts so long, and there's nothing super rewarding about being a victim unless you get out of it, and no one's coming to help you out of it but you.
Well, I think something that you just said right there, I think it really hits home for me, is whenever you said it was craveable. You know, like victimhood is very craveable because basically it's a release. Immediately your problem goes away because you get to shove the blame or your problems on something or somebody else. And it's like poof, it's gone. Especially if you get some sort of like confirmation from a friend and they're like, yeah, screw that guy, or yeah, exactly, we can't control that. As soon as you get that confirmation, then it's like, well, gone.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where so many people just like grind their wheels for literally all their life. They don't get any traction whatsoever because they get in that cycle. They think, okay, well, this is exactly what happened last time. It's not my fault. It's that person's fault. Or this was out of my hands. This is something that nobody can control. And then you get that confirmation from the buddy that's been grinding their wheels their entire life as well. And it's like, yeah, man, life sucks. And then you just stay there.
Which is so funny. So if you guys are really, as Brett's saying this, I feel like I'm having deja vu from a conversation we had a couple podcasts ago, I think, a couple episodes, where we were talking about forming habits and making sustainable habits. And the way that your brain works, it's kind of a recall system. Like, you develop more confidence moving forward by replicating the same action over and over again. So if you've never stuck to a workout routine, chances are it's because you've never stuck to a workout routine. Like, you've never pushed beyond that limit that has proved that you can do it. So then your brain just has no memory of that. Like, in your memory file, it doesn't have any data to pull from. But if you have faced this circumstance where you're unhappy and then you point the blame and say, well, it's that person's fault, and you got confirmation from your immediate circle and that felt good because they were comforting and because it was no longer in your hands, then the next time you face a situation where you're uncomfortable, you're unhappy, and you're feeling stuck, you're going to point the blame somewhere else, because last time we did this, we got comfort. We got comfort from our immediate circle. We had a reprieve from that pain and that discomfort, but it's going to circle back unless you get out of that cycle, unless you just own your shit and you start moving forward. It's a habit development. It is just the literal programming of how your brain works, is that it's going to crave comfort and it's going to crave something that it's already experienced because it wants that safety and that stability. So if you're continually falling back on blaming others and just cycling back into this victimhood where, it's always someone else's fault, it certainly, I had no hands on the issue and what brought me to this point, then you can expect to just relive this little Groundhog Day forever, because it's going to continue to cycle.
Yeah. And if this is a little bit of a sidebar, but if you continue to surround yourself with those people that basically just confirm your negative thoughts, you're going to stay in that negative feedback loop. You're never going to actually take ownership of your actions if you continue to surround yourself with the people that don't take ownership of their own actions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you hang around 5 smokers, you'll be the 6th. If you hang around 5 fit people, you'll be the 6th. It's all about who you surround yourself with and what they tolerate. What you tolerate becomes the standard. And if you tolerate the excuses, if you tolerate the constant blaming of others, and if you if you just never take responsibility, it seems so simple to me in saying that. If you just take responsibility for where you're at, take responsibility for the position you're in right now. And I know that there's so many underlying layers to that. But at the end of the day, if you're waiting for someone to apologize, if you're waiting for a wrong to be righted, I hate to say it, but they're not coming. That wrong is not going to be righted. Someone's not going to, the person that you're holding a grudge against is not going to come knocking on your door and resolve all those issues. So what can you do from right here? Because you can't do anything about the past. You can't do anything about anyone else, but you can control yourself. You can control your attitude, your effort. You can control what you do tomorrow.
Yeah. It's cliche, but life's not fair. Nobody has the same starting spot. But that doesn't mean that that's just permission to just be, just an absolute stick in the mud and just do nothing.
Yeah. And if you have these ambitions, if you want to start a business, or if you want to get healthy, if you want to try to become the world's best fill in the blank here, don't you want it I mean, if even if you fail, don't you want to say that it's just because you didn't have enough or you didn't have what it takes, not just because you didn't try or because so and so screwed you out of an opportunity. Like, that's not the story you want to tell. That's not the legacy you want to leave, is pointing blame to someone else.
Yeah. I mean, the best American made like stories, the American made people that have these amazing stories, most of them start from nothing. Those make the greatest stories. And wouldn't it be cool to be able to be that person that took ownership of your shit and figured out that nobody's coming, and that really at the end of the day it's just you, and you are the one who has to take ownership of your actions and commit to being better in all facets of life in order to achieve whatever it is that you're setting out to achieve, and being able to hang your hat on that at the end of your life and be able to say, I did it.
Yeah, I mean, it's
against all odds.
It's so possible that the person listening to this right now has so much more on their plate than I do. It's very possible. And they're probably listening to this saying, like, well, it's easy because you don't have all of these things. But you know how badass it would be if you accomplished everything that you ever dreamed of, despite that long list of excuses, despite that long list of reasons why you probably shouldn't, why you might not. Like, that's even cooler. The stories of the people overcoming those deficits and digging themselves out, those are the headlining. Those are the biographies that you read. So I think that's inspiring. Just if you can identify and take ownership and say, I was part of the problem, but that means that I can be part of the solution. I can work my way out of this. I think that's incredibly empowering.
Yeah. Playing the comparison game all your life is never going to get you anywhere. You can play comparison game from both directions. There's always going to be somebody who had it worse than you, and there's always going to be somebody who had it better than you. No matter where you're coming from, if you have an easier start than somebody else, or if you have a harder start than somebody else, neither of those things should give you permission just to be average, or to just not try to do something. Just because life's either harder, or it's like, hey, why would I try whenever things were handed to me pretty easily, Take ownership of what you've been given, little or a lot, whatever it is. Take ownership of it, take advantage of it, and use it. Propel yourself into whatever it is that you aspire to be, full steam ahead. And it's really just one of the most liberating things you can do, because if you do truly take ownership of everything in your life, the good, the bad, the ugly, and you say, you know what, this is me.
It takes away everyone else's power against you.
100%.
I think that people feel powerless, or they feel insecure because they're like living a lie. And if you can, live authentically, if you can live vulnerably and say, this is what I have, this is what I bring to the table, and this is 100% on me. Like, what I have moving forward is on me. What I had in the past, that's on me too. Like, you take away everyone's power, what are they going to have against you? Dirty little secrets? Nope, you owned it. Like,
yeah,
you didn't pull your weight? Nope, I own that. Moving forward, this is what you can expect from me. That takes everybody's power away from you. That takes you know what I mean?
Yeah. It 100% what you mean. I was listening to a podcast today with Rainn Wilson in it, and if you don't know who Rainn Wilson is, it's Dwight off The Office. I think 99.99% of people know who that is. Rainn Wilson didn't make it in his career until like his late 30s. And we looking at him and how he just burst into fame through The Office, you would assume that guy, just had a super successful career all around. But like a lot of people, he wasn't successful at all for a very long time. And I was listening to him on the podcast, and I was thinking, Rainn Wilson, like, I get used to it, whenever you get used to somebody's voice whenever you listen to them on a show, and whenever I listened to him on the podcast, I was like, man, I almost forgot that Rainn Wilson's voice sounds like that. Like, he's a goofy guy just in general. Like, he plays the part super well. He fits the part super well. But I'm sure that there were a lot of people that doubted him because he doesn't fit the stereotypical mold for an actor. Like he's not
Handsome.
He's not Tom Cruise. I mean, he doesn't have like a deep masculine voice.
Rain, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry for saying you're not handsome.
If we get Rainn Wilson listening, we're doing something right. But I can only imagine that Rainn Wilson at some point in his life just took 100% ownership of what he had, what he was given, and ran with it. He even when he was reflecting back on his life, his mom left him in early in his life at like 1.5 years old. So he had to take ownership of his situation at a very early age, having a broken house. And I think that that's just one example of somebody who's made it really big that anybody knows the Office. You know who Rainn Wilson is, and it's empowering to think that you can literally do anything that you set your mind to, and you may not see an opportunity that's going to just happen upon you in the future, but don't discount yourself and take ownership of what you've got and what abilities you have and even your shortcomings and make the most of it.
Yeah, I promise you're way more capable than you believe or than you are giving yourself credit for once you just understand that you have that power, that if you can take responsibility for where you're at right now moving forward and you wholeheartedly believe it, it is a completely different ballgame. So do you have any final thoughts?
I don't know if I have any big closing thoughts.
I think that it's one of the most empowering things. And I just want to circle back to, if you were part of the problem, you can be part of the solution. And if you look at it that way, it's so liberating and it's exciting because we collectively spend so much time pointing the finger at someone else. And I think that just having that conversation in the mirror and saying, I have not pulled my weight. I have let you down, but here's what you can expect from me moving forward. That is such an attractive quality. That is such a reliable quality in a human. And I think that you owe that to yourself. So,
yeah. If you come from a broken household, if you come from if you've had childhood trauma, if you've had, there's so many, the list goes on forever and ever. You have all these things that make you. Don't let them be something that you use as a crutch your entire life. Take ownership of everything in your life, and it's the most liberating thing you'll ever do.
And let those be a badass story to tell about how you overcame.
100%.
All right. Well, we will talk to you guys next week. If you have any topic ideas or if you have any questions for our Q&A, I think that we may be doing a Q&A next week. You can send those to pod@lexijwellness.com. But until then, we'll talk to you guys later.